In a world where even the gods bleed, betrayal isn't a flaw, it's a law. And in Greek mythology, no oath is ever truly sacred. Stay with us as we unravel the cruelest, most unforgettable betrayals from the myths that shaped the ancient world and echo still. In ours, Chapter 1, Chaos and Broken Bonds. Before there were gods, before there were men, there was only chaos. Not chaos like war or noise, but chaos as a void, a dark, endless silence. No sky, no sea, no time, just stillness. From that emptiness, the first beings were born. Gaia, the earth, rose from the void. She was fertile, solid, and alive. From her body came mountains, rivers, and the seeds of all life. But she was alone, and so she created Uranus the sky to cover her, to be her partner. Together, Gaia and Uranus had many children. Some were beautiful, like the Titans. Others were terrifying, like the one-eyed Cyclopes and the Hecatonchires with 100 hands. But Uranus hated the ugly ones. He was ashamed of them, so he locked them deep inside Gaia, forcing them into the earth's belly. Gaia cried out in pain, not just from the weight, but from the betrayal. She had given Uranus everything, her love, her children, her trust, and he had turned against her, not with weapons, but with silence, with rejection, with cruelty. That was the first betrayal, but it would not be the last. Gaia could have wept forever, but instead, she did something different. She called her Titan sons and asked them for help. Most were afraid. Only one stepped forward, Cronus, the youngest, clever and ambitious. Gaia gave Cronus a sickle, sharp and curved like the moon. And when night came, and Uranus lowered himself over the earth, Cronus struck. He didn't just hurt his father, he unmade him. With one cut, he separated the sky from the earth, and the age of Uranus ended. This was the first rebellion of son against father, and it would set a pattern for generations to come. Cronus became king. He married his sister Rhea, and together they ruled over a golden age. But Cronus, like his father, carried fear inside him. Uranus had cursed him with a prophecy that he, too, would be overthrown by his own child. So when Rhea gave birth to their first son, Cronus smiled and swallowed the baby whole. He did the same with the second, and the third. One by one, he ate his own children, not out of hate, but out of fear. He thought if he kept them inside him, they could never rise against him. This was the second betrayal, a deeper one, not the betrayal of love, but of life itself. Cronus broke the sacred bond between parent and child. He didn't just deny their future, he erased it. Rhea, heartbroken and helpless, endured in silence, until her sixth child, Zeus, was born. She couldn't let Cronus take this one, so she hid the baby in a cave on the island of Crete and gave her husband a stone wrapped in cloth instead. Cronus swallowed the rock, thinking it was his son. And so, for years, Zeus grew up in secret, far from the throne that should have been his. And that's where the cycle of betrayal truly begins. What started with Uranus, a father rejecting his children, passed to Cronus and would soon fall into Zeus's hands. Because betrayal in Greek mythology isn't random, it's inherited, it's part of the bloodline, passed down like a curse. And yet, in each of these stories, betrayal is also a kind of fire. It burns, yes, but it clears the way for something new. When Gaia betrayed Uranus, the Titans were freed. When Cronus swallowed his children, it gave Zeus a reason to rise. Every wound becomes a weapon. And here, in the quiet before Zeus's rebellion, the stage is set. The sky has been torn from the earth. Time, as we know it, has begun. But it was not born from peace. It was born from fear, revenge, and broken trust. This is the world of Greek mythology, not a world of black and white, but of shifting loyalties, deep scars, and the timeless battle between power and love. We begin our journey here, in the silence after the first strike. The first betrayal was not the worst, but it taught the gods one lesson they would never forget. No throne is ever safe. No bond is ever sacred forever. Chapter 2. Cronus, the devourer of his children. After the fall of Uranus, the world seemed at peace. Cronus ruled as the new king of the cosmos. The Titans were free, the earth was calm, and time itself, which Cronus represented, began to move forward. It was a golden age, but beneath that golden light, something dark stirred. Cronus had power, but he also had the curse of prophecy. His father, Uranus, had spoken it with his last breath. You, too, will be overthrown by your son. Those words followed Cronus like a shadow. No matter how high he climbed, no matter how many stars he ruled, that voice whispered in his mind. He loved power, and power made him afraid. Cronus married his sister, Rhea. She was wise, gentle, and deeply loyal. Together, they ruled over gods and nature. And soon, they began to have children. But each time Rhea gave birth, Cronus remembered the prophecy. He feared his own child would grow strong, rise up, and take his throne, just as he had done to his father. So when their first child Hestia was born, Cronus did something unimaginable. He swallowed her whole, not in anger, not in punishment, but to control fate. Rhea was horrified, but Cronus promised it was necessary to keep balance, to prevent chaos. Then came the second child, Demeter, and again he swallowed her. Then Hera, then Hades, then Poseidon. 5 children, 5 lives consumed, each one a potential future erased, each one a betrayal deeper than the last. Rhea cried alone, her arms always empty. She had given life, and her husband had taken it from her. She had trusted him with her heart, and he had turned that trust into silence. Cronus called it protection. Rhea called it fear. By the time the 6th child was ready to be born, Rhea had reached her breaking point. She knew she could not stop Cronus by force, but perhaps she could trick him, the same way Gaia had tricked Uranus. So when Zeus was born, Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and handed it to Cronus. As expected, he swallowed it without question. Meanwhile, she hid her real son far away, in a cave on Mount Ida in Crete. There, nymphs raised him in secret. He drank the milk of a magical goat named Amalthea, and the sounds of his cries were hidden by the beat of drums. Zeus grew up hearing stories of his lost siblings, of his father's cruelty, and of the world that waited for him. He wasn't raised with love alone, but with purpose. Rhea's pain became his fire, and one day he would return. But let's pause and look deeper at Cronus himself. He wasn't a monster, not truly. He was a god afraid of his own destiny, a god shaped by betrayal. He had seen how power could be taken, because he had taken it himself. Now, he lived in fear of that same fate. What Cronus did was terrible, but it was also human. We've seen leaders in history, and even people in our own lives, who'd hold on too tightly, to power, to control, to relationships. They fear the future so much that they try to freeze it, and in doing so, they break the very things they're trying to protect. Cronus didn't understand that fate isn't a thing you can swallow. It always finds a way to escape. The betrayal here is layered. Cronus betrayed his children by denying them the right to live. He betrayed Rhea by turning her love into a lie. But most of all, he betrayed himself by giving in to fear. Greek mythology doesn't just show gods as perfect beings, it shows them with flaws, desires, and regrets. That's why their stories still speak to us. We see our own choices in theirs, magnified, but familiar. Zeus, growing in secret, became the hope of a new order, not just to free his siblings, but to break the cycle of fear. But could he really be different from those who came before? That's the question we'll explore in the next chapter. For now, imagine Cronus, sitting on his throne, believing he is one. He has no idea that in a quiet cave far away, a child is growing. A child who will change everything. And perhaps, just perhaps, Cronus already knows. Because no matter how far you push fate away, it always circles back. Chapter 3. Zeus, the liberator who betrayed his own in the hidden caves of Crete. Far from the throne of Cronus, a storm was growing. Zeus had been raised in secret, fed by divine goats, guarded by nymphs, and trained in silence. But his life had never truly been his own. From the moment of his birth, he carried a single purpose: to confront the father who had swallowed his siblings and bring an end to the reign of fear. That day had come. Zeus left the shadows and returned to the world of the gods. But he did not charge in with swords or lightning. He came with a plan, and with patience. He first sought the help of Metis, a goddess of wisdom and cunning. She gave him a drink laced with powerful magic. This drink would do what no weapon could. It would force Cronus to release the children he had swallowed so long ago. Zeus disguised himself and approached Cronus, perhaps as a servant, perhaps as a stranger. The stories vary, but what matters is this. Cronus drank from the cup, and suddenly, the past came rushing back. One by one, the gods Zeus had never met, his brothers and sisters, were freed from Cronus' body, fully grown, immortal, and burning with fury. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, they stood beside Zeus, not just as siblings, but as an army. Together, they had one goal: to end the rule of the Titans. This war would be known as the Titanomachy, the battle between the old gods and the new. It lasted 10 years. The skies shook, mountains fell, oceans boiled. Titans and gods fought side by side, each one representing a different force of nature, time, or memory. Cronus, despite his fear, fought with the strength of a king, but his time was ending. Zeus, with the help of the Cyclopes, the same beings Cronus had once locked away, received the thunderbolt, a weapon of sky and storm. It became the symbol of his power and the turning point in the war. With lightning in his hand and purpose in his heart, Zeus struck down Cronus and cast the Titans into Tartarus, a prison deeper than the earth, where they would be locked away for eternity. The war was over. The age of the Titans had ended, and Zeus was now king. But here is where the story becomes more complex, and where betrayal rises again, because Zeus, the liberator, would soon become the one who ruled through control. He divided the world among himself and his brothers. He took the sky, Poseidon took the sea, Hades took the underworld. The earth would be shared, though Zeus claimed final say. He built a new order, with himself at the center. He married his sister Hera and ruled from Mount Olympus. The gods had names, now, temples, followers, myths. But power changes everything. Zeus had once fought for freedom. Now he demanded loyalty. He had once defied his father. Now he feared his children, just like Cronus before him. Zeus became suspicious of challenges, especially those born from his own blood. When he heard a prophecy that a child of Meteus would surpass him, he swallowed her whole. Just like his father had swallowed his sibling, the cycle repeated. And this is the tragedy of Zeus. He rose as a hero. He became a symbol of justice and strength, but deep down, he was still his father's son. He betrayed Metis, the one who had helped him win the war. He betrayed the idea of freedom by ruling with fear and pride, and eventually, he would be betrayed in turn by gods, mortals, even his own children. In Greek mythology, no one holds the throne forever. Every hero becomes a tyrant. Every savior becomes the next obstacle. It is a pattern that we see again and again, not just in myths, but in our world. Zeus's story shows us how easy it is to become what you once fought against. He began with justice. He ended with control. He freed his siblings, but he imprisoned others. He punished rebels, though he was once one himself. And through it all, the gods watched. The Olympians, the new rulers, were not pure. They had been born from betrayal, shaped by fear, and crowned by war. They were gods, yes, but also reflections of us, powerful, flawed, and caught in cycles they could not escape. And so, the throne of Zeus shined in the light of Olympus, but cast a long shadow over all who followed. Chapter 4. Prometheus, the betrayer of Zeus. There are betrayals born from ambition, others from fear, but some are born from something more powerful: compassion. Prometheus was a titan, born before Zeus, before the Olympians, before the world had shape. When the Titan War ended and Zeus claimed the throne, many titans were cast into Tartarus, but not Prometheus. Zeus spared him. Why? Because Prometheus was different. He had foresight, his name means forethought, and he had knowledge that Zeus respected. Prometheus had sided with the Olympians during the war. He had helped them win. And yet, even loyalty has limits. After the victory, Zeus began to build the world in his own image. He created the heavens, the sea, the seasons, and at last, he turned to humanity. But Zeus didn't see humans the way Prometheus did. To Zeus, mankind was fragile, weak, disposable. They were creatures of dust and breath, meant to serve the gods and keep their place. Prometheus disagreed. He had seen the potential in them, their curiosity, their endurance, their hunger to grow. He believed they deserved a chance, not just to survive, but to thrive. And so, he gave them a gift. Not gold, not wisdom. He gave them fire. It seems simple now, but in ancient times, fire was everything. It meant warmth, protection, tools, cooking, civilization. It was a symbol of the divine, the light of the gods. To give fire to mankind was to give them a spark of godhood. It was a betrayal, not because Prometheus hated Zeus, but but because he loved something more: humanity. When Zeus saw what Prometheus had done, he was furious. This was not a small act of defiance. It was a rebellion, hidden in kindness. Fire meant independence, and independence meant danger. Zeus had forbidden it, and now mortals had it. The power to build cities, to forge weapons, to question the gods, to choose their own path. This was not just betrayal, it was revolution. Zeus struck back hard. First, he punished mankind. He created Pandora, the first woman, and sent her to Earth with a sealed jar. When opened, it released suffering, illness, and despair into the world. That was Zeus's way of reminding mortals that gifts from the gods always come with a price. Then he turned to Prometheus. The punishment was not quick, it was not merciful, it was eternal. Zeus ordered Prometheus to be chained to a rock in the Caucasus Mountains. Every day, an eagle, the symbol of Zeus, would fly down and tear open his chest, eating his liver. Every night, the liver would grow back, and every day, it would happen again. Pain, regeneration, pain, again. Not for a week, not for a year, but for thousands of years. This was how the gods punished betrayal, especially when that betrayal was righteous. But here's what makes this story powerful. Prometheus never begged. He never apologized. He never stopped believing he had done the right thing. Even in agony, he stayed silent. Not because he lacked pain, but because he had faith. Eventually, he would be rescued. But that comes later. For now, what matters is this. Prometheus gave humanity more than fire. He gave them a symbol of courage, of rebellion, of hope. He showed that sometimes the greatest betrayal is the one that changes the world for the better. Zeus feared that kind of change, because in the world of Greek mythology, control matters more than justice. Power must be protected, even at the cost of pain. But Prometheus reminds us that betrayal is not always a sin. Sometimes it's a sacrifice. Sometimes you choose to be hated by gods so others can live in the light. And in that choice, Prometheus became more than a titan. He became a mirror, a reminder that every great change begins with one quiet act of defiance. Chapter 5. Medea Betrayal. Fueled by love and vengeance. Some betrayals are cold, calculated, others burn from the start. Medea's story is the second kind, a fire that began as love and ended in ashes. She was a princess, a sorceress, a granddaughter of the sun god Helios. But more than anything, Medea was a woman pulled into a story not her own, a tale of heroes, golden treasures, and broken promises. That tale began with Jason. Jason, the prince of Iolcus, arrived in Medea's land in search of the golden fleece, a magical relic said to bring kingship and power. He came with his ship, the Argo, and a band of heroes behind him. But it wasn't swords or strength that helped Jason, it was Medea. The gods, or perhaps fate, made Medea fall in love with him. Not a simple affection, but a deep, wild devotion, a love that crossed bloodlines, borders, and beliefs. Medea betrayed everything for Jason. She turned against her own father, the king. She used her magic to help Jason survive impossible trials. She helped him steal the golden fleece, and when they fled, she did the unthinkable. To slow her father's ship, Medea killed her own brother and scattered his pieces into the sea, forcing her father to stop and collect them, piece by piece. This was her first betrayal, of family, of blood, of home, and she did it all for love. Jason and Medea escaped to Greece, married, and had children. For a while, it seemed like the sacrifice was worth it. Medea had a new life, a husband, a family. But Jason changed. He was no longer the wandering hero. He had ambition. He saw a chance to rise higher by marrying into royal power again. This time, by leaving Medea and wedding the daughter of the king of Corinth. He tried to make it sound reasonable, political. He told Medea it was for the future, for the children. But she saw the truth. He had used her, her love, her loyalty, her magic, and now he cast her aside for status. Jason's betrayal was quiet. He didn't scream, he didn't fight, he just walked away. But for someone who had given up everything, silence was the deepest cut. And Medea, once a lover, now a fury, answered him not with tears, but with revenge. She sent a gift to Jason's new bride, a beautiful robe and crown. The moment the girl wore them, they burst into flames. consuming her alive. The fire spread to the king, killing him as well. Jason was broken, but Medea had one final act left, the most unthinkable of all. She turned on her own children. Some say she killed them to hurt Jason. Others say she feared they'd be punished for her crimes. Some versions even claim the gods took them instead to hide the truth. Whatever the version, the meaning is clear. Love, when betrayed, can become the darkest force of all. Medea didn't run. She escaped in a chariot pulled by dragons, a final image of a woman burned by betrayal and reborn in rage. Her story doesn't offer comfort. There are no heroes here, only choices and consequences. Jason betrayed a woman who had destroyed her entire life for him. Medea betrayed everything else in return. And we, the listeners, are left wondering, who was right? Is love without limits a gift or a curse? Medea's tale survives because it makes us uncomfortable, because we recognize her pain, we fear her fury, and, in some strange way, we understand it. Chapter 6. Atreus and Thyestes, the banquet of blood. Some betrayals are quick, a lie, a sword, a single moment, but others unfold slowly, like a sickness in the blood. That's what happened to the house of Atreus, a royal line cursed, not by the gods, but by themselves. This is the darkest story in our journey. It begins with two brothers, Atreus and Thyestes, sons of Pelops, princes of Mycenae. They were born into a line already stained with betrayal. Their father had cheated to win a chariot race, then murdered the man who helped him. The gods cursed the family, but the real curse came from within. Atreus and Thyestes were close once, but like so many in myth, their bond cracked over the same old poison, power. When the king of Mycenae died, both brothers claimed the throne. Atreus believed it should be his. Thyestes disagreed. The kingdom was torn between them. Atreus proposed a solution. Whoever could make the sun rise in the west the wrong direction would win the crown. Thyestes agreed, thinking it impossible. But then, the sun did just that. The gods, perhaps in a rare moment of humor or cruelty, reversed the heavens to support Atreus. He became king. But that didn't end the rivalry. It only pushed it deeper. Behind Atreus's back, Thyestes seduced Atreus's wife. It wasn't just lust, it was strategy. By taking the queen, Thyestes hoped to steal the throne from within. When Atreus found out, something inside him broke. Not with grief, but with calculation. He plotted a revenge so precise, so horrifying, that even the gods looked away. Atreus invited Thyestes to a feast, a royal reconciliation. There was food, drink, music. Thyestes sat at the king's table, enjoying every bite. What he didn't know was that the meat he was eating came from his own sons. Atreus had killed Thyestes' children, cooked them, and served them to their father as a banquet. When the truth was revealed, Thyestes didn't scream. He didn't cry. He stared at the bones laid before him, and something inside him died. This moment, the Feast of Flesh, is one of the most disturbing scenes in Greek mythology. Not because of the gore, but because of the intent. Atreus wanted not just to punish his brother, he wanted to unmake him, and in doing so, he unmade himself. No throne can stand clean after something like this. The betrayal didn't end there. It never does. Thyestes fled into exile, but not before receiving a prophecy that one day his revenge would come through a son born of his own daughter. Yes, the cycle deepened. Thyestes tricked his daughter, unknowingly fathered a son with her, and raised that child, Aegisthus, to one day kill Atreus. And he did. Aegisthus struck down his uncle. The house of Atreus fell, only to rise again in the next generation, with Agamemnon, Orestes, Electra, each carrying the blood of betrayal, each repeating the pattern. So what do we take from this? The story of Atreus and Thyestes is not just about revenge, it's about how vengeance corrupts the soul, how pain, when fed instead of healed, grows teeth, how family, when turned inward, can become the sharpest knife, and perhaps most frightening, it's about how betrayal never truly ends. It moves like a shadow through generations, changing names and faces, but always hungry. Greek mythology doesn't give us neat lessons, but it gives us warnings, and this one is clear. When blood is repaid with blood, no one walks away clean. Chapter 7. Clytemnestra, the queen who waited with a knife in the great palace of Mycenae. The servants swept the floors. The queen stood by the doorway, waiting, Her name was Clytemnestra, wife of Agamemnon, sister of Helen of Troy. But the woman who waited at the gates was no longer a wife. She was something else, a storm held in silence. Let's go back to understand why. When Helen was taken to Troy, her husband Menelaus, Clytemnestra, his brother-in-law, called on all the Greek kings to join him in war. Among them was Agamemnon, king of Mycenae. But there was a problem. The winds wouldn't blow. The fleet was stuck on the shore. The seer Calchas gave a terrible answer. The goddess Artemis was angry. To please her and summon the winds, Agamemnon had to sacrifice his daughter. He agreed. Some say he tricked Clytemnestra, telling her their daughter would be married to the hero Achilles. Some say Clytemnestra. Either way, the result was the same. Agamemnon led Iphigenia to the altar, and there, before the army, he killed his own child. The winds returned, the war began, and Clytemnestra was left behind, not just alone, but broken. This was betrayal. Not of marriage, not of country, but of motherhood. 10 years passed. Agamemnon fought at Troy. He conquered cities, took riches, and brought back a new prize. Cassandra, the Trojan priestess, cursed to speak the truth but never be believed. When the war ended, Agamemnon sailed home. He expected glory, he expected praise, but something else waited for him. Clytemnestra had not forgotten, she had not forgiven, and she had not been idle. While Agamemnon fought overseas, Clytemnestra had taken a lover, Aegisthus, son of Theus. Yes, the same cursed family from our last chapter, but their bond wasn't just passion, it was revenge. Aegisthus wanted to destroy the house of Atreus. Clytemnestra wanted to punish the man who had killed her daughter. Together, they formed a quiet plan. When Agamemnon arrived, Clytemnestra welcomed him with warmth. She smiled. She offered him a red carpet, a symbol of royalty, but also of blood. He walked inside, unguarded, and there, in the heart of his own palace, she killed him. Some say it was with a knife while he bathed. Others say it was with an axe while he prayed. Cassandra was killed too, the priestess who saw it coming, but who no one ever believed. And then, there was silence. Clytemnestra stood over the bodies, her husband, her daughter's killer, She had taken justice into her own hands, but in doing so, she became the next link in the chain of betrayal, because the story doesn't end there. Clytemnestra ruled Mycenae with but years later, Orestes, her son, would return, grown and furious. Guided by his sister Electra, he would avenge Agamemnon by killing his own mother. So now we ask, who betrayed whom? Was it Agamemnon, who sacrificed a daughter for war? Was it Clytemnestra, who killed a husband for justice? Or Orestes, who murdered his mother for revenge? This is the heart of Greek tragedy. No one is innocent. Each act leads to another. Each betrayal gives birth to the next. Clytemnestra was not just a queen. She was a symbol of grief, fury, and the terrible cost of silence. She waited for 10 years, and when the door finally opened, she met betrayal with betrayal. Chapter 8. Orestes. The son who avenged with blood the halls of Mycenae were quiet again. The echo of footsteps had faded. The red carpet was gone, but betrayal still lingered in the air, heavy and waiting. Years had passed since Agamemnon was murdered by his wife. His son, Orestes, had been sent away as a child, far from the palace, far from the blood. But blood calls to blood. When Orestes came of age, he returned, not as a boy, but as a man with a mission. He was not alone. His sister, Electra, was still in Mycenae. She had lived through the aftermath, the rule of Clytemnestra. She had seen her mother smiling while the memory of their father faded like smoke. Electra had not forgotten. She had not forgiven, and she whispered to her brother, "It's time." Orestes hesitated. He wasn't a warrior. He was a son. But in ancient Greece, family wasn't just blood. It was duty. A son had to honor his father, and that meant revenge. So he crept into the palace, like a ghost. Some say he disguised himself. Others say he entered in the daylight, bold and clear. Either way, he killed Aegisthus first, the usurper, the traitor, the one who had sat on his father's throne. Then, he turned to his mother, Clytemnestra, the woman who had carried him, raised him, once held him to her chest. She begged him to stop. She reminded him, "I am your mother." He reminded her, "You killed my father." And then, he struck. Clytemnestra died by her son's hand. But in that moment, Orestes didn't feel victorious. He felt hollow, because this was no longer justice. This was a curse, and the curse had just begun. As Orestes stood in the silence of what he'd done, the world around him began to change. No one cheered. No gods appeared. Instead, he heard a sound, low at first, then growing louder, a rustle, a whisper. Out of the shadows came the Furies, ancient spirits of vengeance. They weren't beautiful, they weren't kind, they were older than the gods, and they had one purpose: to hunt down those who spill family blood. Orestes ran, across cities, through temples, into mountains. The Furies chased him, invisible to others, but always there. Their eyes never closed, their voices never stopped. They didn't care that he had followed a command. They didn't care that his mother had killed his father. All they saw was matricide, a child murdering a parent. Guilt became a weight he could not carry. He cried out to the gods. He went to the temple of Apollo, the very god who had told him to take revenge, and begged for help. Apollo sent him to Athens to face a trial, not of warriors, but of words. For the first time in myth, a murder would be judged by reason, not by violence. Athena herself, goddess of wisdom, presided over the court. Arguments were made, voices rose, and finally, Athena cast the deciding vote. Orestes was acquitted. He had been guilty, but now he was also free. The Furies, furious and ancient, were calmed. Athena gave them a new name, the kindly ones. She gave them a role in the new world, to protect justice, not just punish it. It was a moment of change, a shift from endless revenge to something closer to mercy. But even with the judgment passed, one truth remained. Orestes had killed his mother. He had avenged a betrayal with a betrayal, and that act would live in his heart forever. Greek mythology often shows justice through blood, but in Orestes' story, we see something new. The struggle to break the cycle. He asked the gods a question we still ask today. When is revenge justice? And when does it simply create more pain? There's no easy answer. Just a man standing in the ruins of his family, trying to move forward. Chapter 9. The Cycle of Betrayal. Why the gods never learn by now. You may have noticed something unsettling. From Chaos to Zeus, from Medea to Orestes, betrayal is not rare in Greek mythology. It's the rule, not the exception. But why? Why do gods betray mortals? Why do mortals betray gods? Why do parents harm their children, and children turn on their parents? Is it fate? Or is it something deeper? Let's step back and look at the pattern. It starts with fear. Uranus feared his children, so he buried them. Cronus feared his son, so he swallowed him. Zeus feared rebellion, so he turned into the very tyrant he once overthrew. Each betrayal was an attempt to stop the future, to hold power, to control change, to freeze time. But Greek mythology is brutally honest about one thing: you can't stop the future. The more you try to control fate, the more violently it breaks free. That is what makes betrayal in these stories so constant, because it is tied to power, and power, once gained, always wants more. Even among mortals, we see the same cycle. Medea loves Jason. Jason betrays her. She burns everything. Clytemnestra loses her daughter. She kills her husband. Orestes kills his mother, is chased by guilt. Each act of revenge becomes the next betrayal, and no one escapes untouched. But here's the twist. These myths aren't just about violence, they're about recognition. In ancient Greece, people saw their own world reflected in these stories. A world where justice wasn't perfect, where kings were cruel, where loyalty could be dangerous, where even the gods were flawed. The myths weren't teaching moral lessons. They were holding up a mirror. They told listeners, you're not alone in your chaos. Even the gods can't keep their promises. Even the heroes fall. This is why betrayal in Greek mythology feels so human. Because it is. It speaks to things we all feel. The fear of being abandoned, the pain of being used, the desire to strike back when trust is broken, the question of whether forgiveness is ever enough. Even the gods can't answer that last one. They punish, they curse, they regret, but they rarely forgive. And maybe that's why their world remains in conflict. Because forgiveness ends a story, but betrayal keeps it going. Betrayal is dramatic. It's loud. It's unforgettable. That's why it sits at the center of myth, like fire in a cold room. So, when we look at these ancient stories, we're not just seeing a string of shocking moments. We're seeing a system, one where power always comes at a cost, and trust is always at risk. But beneath all that, there's something more powerful than the betrayals themselves. It's the attempt, however flawed, to understand them, to ask, why did this happen? What made them turn? Could it have ended differently? And maybe those questions matter more than the answers, because that's where wisdom begins. Chapter 10. The echoes that remain. The myths are quiet now. The gods have finished their battles. The heroes have buried their dead. The betrayals, fierce, tragic, unforgettable, have played out across time like a great storm slowly fading. But what remains? We began this journey in chaos. We met gods who betrayed their parents, children who broke sacred bonds, and lovers who turned vengeance into fire. And with each chapter, a pattern unfolded of power, fear, love, and loss. Yet beyond the noise and pain, something deeper shines through. Why we remember these stories? Because betrayal is not just about gods or monsters. It's about us. It's the friend who breaks your trust, the leader who forgets their people, the family member who turns away when you needed them most. But it's also the strength to carry on after the breaking, to rebuild, to choose differently. The Greeks didn't tell these stories to entertain. They told them to understand the world and their place in it. They knew that betrayal doesn't just destroy, it shows us what we value, what we fear losing, what we're willing to do when the world feels unfair. Each myth we've shared isn't just a warning, it's a mirror. When Cronus devours his children, we see how fear twists love. When Medea strikes back, we see how devotion can curdle into rage. When Orestes stands before the gods, we see how even justice can leave scars. And still, we keep telling their stories, in books, in plays, in films, in quiet whispers at night, because somewhere, deep down, we recognize the truth they carry. That betrayal is not just an ending, it's a turning point. The moment where someone's world shifts, where the future cracks open, and anything can happen next. It's messy, it's painful, but it's human. And in that humanity, there's power. You see, the gods of Olympus weren't perfect. That's what made them relatable. They were angry, jealous, proud, loving, vengeful, like us. Their stories weren't clean, but they were real. That's why, even after thousands of years, we still listen. Not just to gasp at their betrayals, but to learn from them. So when you think back on these tales of Cronus, Zeus, Medea, Atreus, Clytemnestra, see choice, see consequence, see the fragile thread that holds all trust together. And know this, every act of betrayal once began with hope. Every broken bond was once whole. That's what makes these stories powerful and painful, because they remind us of what's at stake when we choose to trust. If this journey through myth and memory made you pause even just for a moment, consider leaving a like. It helps this story reach others who might need it. And if you want to explore more timeless tales, hit subscribe. We'll be waiting by the fire. Have thoughts, share them in the comments. We'd love to hear what betrayal meant to you in these myths, and what echoes stayed with you. Until next time, may your stories be strong, and your trust never broken.